I was following it and he was like 1 minute away and then he showed up and then he just like drove past us because he couldn't see us. And then he canceled the trip. I was so annoyed.
This is Worldschooling Q&A. I'm Astrid, creator of The Wandering Daughter. As a traveling family, we've spent 4 years traveling full-time to over 18 countries and 6 continents. Wherever we go, we try to learn as much as we can about the countries and cultures we visit. While we didn't coin the term, we like to call this worldschooling, using the world as our classroom. Each week, my husband Clint and I will answer one question about worldschooling and share our experiences of traveling the world with our kids. Ready to get started? Great! Let's dive in.
So this week, we're going to talk about how do you safely use Uber or other ride-sharing apps abroad. So this is an interesting question, I think, just because like ride-sharing has been growing in popularity around the world. In the past, people use taxis. Taxis have always been around, but I think ride-sharing is another option. And I personally, there are some issues related to that too, but I personally like it because, you don't have to fiddle around with currency, local currency. You're just paying through the phone. And in some ways that's a little bit safer because then you're not carrying like a big wad of cash or.
Yeah, I think some of the other benefits that I enjoy, especially when we're traveling, is the predictability of it. You know how much you're going to spend. You can have them come exactly to where you are, drop you off exactly where you are, and it's already prearranged, and you don't have to, especially if you don't speak the language, trying to explain to a taxi where you're going can be really hard. So all those reasons, I love it. Having said that, I think the first thing I just want to start with is know the local, not only laws around ride sharing, but also the customs or the culture or etiquette around ride sharing. In some places, there's conflicts between the taxis and the ride sharing, and ride sharing is sometimes banned or frowned upon and can get folks in some awkward situations. So just know those kind of that before you start.
Yeah, that's a good point, Clint. I think just spend some time doing a little bit of research or find, YouTube videos or like blog posts that are related to the destination that you're going to and what the ride sharing situation is over there, because it can be a hot topic.
Okay, so I'm curious about traveling solo because as a family, I think there are some things we can do, but it's mostly just making sure we have a big enough vehicle and that kind of thing. But traveling solo can bring some interesting challenges. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's not necessarily traveling solo, but like, if you might be like by yourself and running an errand and while your family's staying at home and you're going somewhere and need to get a ride by yourself. As a woman or there are some considerations that I would need to keep in mind. And if you're like, a solo mom, or if you're just, a female traveler, my main thing is, using these ride sharing apps safely and just being aware of like your surroundings, checking that, the person that you're supposed to ride with is actually the person that is picking you up. And another one is to sit behind the driver. This is like the position where you are in the car can also help keep you safe. Something that you probably don't think about, but I think about all the time. Like, I never want to sit in the front seat because that driver can like reach over and, assault me in some way. And even in the back seat, the middle and the seat kitty corner from the driver, they can still reach you. So I think the one right behind the driver is the safest. Alternatively, if you're like traveling solo with your kids, maybe you might want to put the kid in that position to keep them a little bit safer, that type of stuff. So just be aware of, like the situations that you put yourself in. If it doesn't feel right, you can always, you can always cancel or you can always stop, like try and get out of it if it doesn't feel right for you.
Yeah. Even if there's a penalty,
Your safety is more important.
the penalty is usually a tiny fee compared to like your safety. And I mean, some people may never have had problems with ride sharing apps. These all like that tip also is not just ride sharing. That could be taxis too, right? Too.
Yeah.
I think there are unfortunately people who have had really unfortunate incidents with both taxi drivers and ride sharing drivers. So it's just something to keep in mind. When we travel, we're already putting ourselves in a slightly vulnerable position. And so our kind of rule of thumb is like, don't be closed off to experiences, but just be aware. I think that's the tip. I think along with what you were saying there, and the other thing that I actually do a lot when we travel, especially with family, when the family's in the car. So I often sit in the front just because that's the way that the cars are with the four of us. So one of the things I always do when we get in the car is I have like Google Maps open or something, and I have the destination keyed in to where we're going. And so I'm kind of following along, making sure that like we're headed in the right direction. This actually plays with taxis too, because sometimes if the taxis are metered, they can go roundabouts to kind of boost the meter. So it's just kind of a way to keep in check there as well.
So with that said, I think having a like reliable data plan or phone that can use data overseas is going to be important. And, carrying around like a spare battery or something, or like a portable charger, just in case like your phone dies while you're traveling, because you're going to be relying on the phone to that. What other tips for using ride sharing apps? Just general tips then would you suggest?
I think ride sharing is so popular right now, and it's grown popularity overall, especially when you're at airports or large shopping malls or things like that. There's usually a ride sharing section. So a section to either get onto the ride sharing or get dropped off. Kind of knowing where that is really helpful. Luckily at airports now, there's usually a lot of signage. At big malls, there's lots of signage. So just knowing kind of the etiquette of where you're supposed to go. We were in India and we were trying to get a ride sharing, and they were actually on the other side of a 4-lane highway trying to pick us up. And there was no way they were going to get to us and no way we were going to get to them. So we had to cancel and eat a little bit of a fee there. So just trying to understand where you are in context to how you're picking up. And if you don't know, maybe ask, like, is there an easy place to pick up ride sharing? The other thing, I think this was in Japan, I was reading that, like, don't try to get ride sharing. Don't get picked up ride sharing near where the taxis sit. Because there's a beef between taxi drivers and ride sharing apps. So try to keep some separation there.
So in like North America, I think Uber and Lyft are popular ones. But and I think Uber is in Europe as well, in some parts of Europe. But in Asia, like Southeast Asia, there's actually a different one that is more common called Grab. And that's the same thing. Like you just download the app and set a payment thing to it, and then you can use it. I think in Japan, when we were there, they had like an app that was more like, it's called Go Taxi. That was the one that we used, or there were a couple other like taxi apps. But
I think, and that's becoming more common too. I know Indonesia has.
The UK also has a taxi
UK
app
has, So there are a lot of the taxi services have come around now, and they have taxi apps that essentially operate the same way. So that's actually been really nice. And in the UK, we like to take the black cabs just to feel fancy. So it's nice to have that.
What other things might you consider for using like ride sharing while you're traveling?
Ride sharing is awesome and predictable. Like I said, it can also be unpredictable. Rides can get canceled easily. They can drop you off in the wrong location. This happened to us in India. They couldn't find where he was supposed to drop us off. So he literally just dropped us off on the side of a street. And we were still a decent way away from where we were trying to go. And it was in the middle of New Delhi, and we didn't know where we were. And our kids were really young. We didn't speak the language. And so luckily we found an auto driver that spoke English that kind of helped us get where we need to go. But like, know where you are. And I think this is where like the maps thing comes into play.
Yep.
Like where you're going, try to kind of figure out where the context of that is. Try to get landmarks. So like if the Uber driver is confused or something, you can at least get dropped off at a landmark where there are other taxis or autos or rickshaws or whatever the case is. There's usually other public transportation there that can get you where you need to go. But landmarks are super critical. Also, landmarks are helpful if you're just taking taxis.
Yeah.
And they're never going to find the apartment I'm staying in, right? So you can just tell them, drop me off at this monument that's like 5 minutes away from my house. Yeah.
I would also add like build in time for waiting because especially if it's like a busy time of day, if it's like a lot of traffic, and we in Indonesia, a recent trip to Indonesia, we saw our driver like I was following it and he was like 1 minute away and then he showed up and then he just like drove past us because he couldn't see us. And then he canceled the trip. I was so annoyed because then we ended up waiting for an hour because then we had to like wait for the new ride to pick us up. So just make sure to build in some of that or expect some of that into your days, I guess. So if you're like trying to get somewhere at a certain time, that's potentially a risk of using a rideshare.
One other quick little tip that's interesting in Asia, I think it plays along lines to this, is Indonesia, for example, especially in really busy areas like Bali or Jakarta, is that cars are a lot slower than scooters. And so what's cool in Asia is that the ride sharing apps usually have scooters as well. So you can, it's a little harder when you have kids, but you can still do it. We see people do it all the time where you book a scooter instead and a person will show up and then you jump on the back of their scooter with them with a helmet. And if you have a kid, you should put a kid between you.
If they're small.
If they're small enough. Otherwise, if your kids are older, they can ride their own scooter with a person. So you may have to book multiple scooters. The trick where that comes handy though is often where a car could be stuck in a traffic jam for over an hour because there's just small compact areas. Scooters, this may terrify you, but it actually is fine with us. Scooters can actually bob and weave a bit and get through, and they're in the ride sharing apps will usually have much different estimations of time is the scooter versus the cars.
Yeah.
Anyways, anything else?
I think that's it. So
do you have any references?
Yeah, I talk about it in my website. So I have a blog post on my website about using Uber safely overseas. So if you want a little bit more information about that, feel free to check out the site for that. Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Worldschooling Q&A with Astrid and Clint. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links we mentioned in the episode and visit my website, thewanderingdaughter.com, to dive deeper into worldschooling and family travel.
If you like what you hear, please consider supporting The Wandering Daughter on Patreon. It really helps us out and keeps the show going. You'll also get exclusive perks like episode transcripts, additional resources, access to office hours with us, and more. You can find us on Spotify or the podcast app of your choice. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can tap the bell icon to get notified when new episodes come out. And if you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps new people find our show.
If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap the bell icon to get notified of new episodes. You can follow me on Instagram @WanderDaughter or follow The Wandering Daughter on Facebook. Links to these are also in the show notes. If you have any worldschooling questions you'd like us to answer for future episodes, feel free to throw them in the comments or send us a message at thewanderingdaughter.com/podcast. Until next time, happy travels!
Bye!